Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about my Shadowland speedruns because they've become a pretty integral part of the live streams, and I look forward to them each and every week. And I've consistently improved my time up to a fastest time of now 28 minutes on the dot, which is pretty quick to clear all 30 stages when it resets at the beginning of the week. If you want to check that out, by the way, every Thursday when Shadowland resets on twitch.tv/Cynicalex. But what I wanted to do, instead of just showing you guys the highlights of why is it all speed characters? What I wanted to do, instead of showing you guys the highlights of my Shadowland clear or talking about what I did right or what I did wrong in the clear, what I instead wanted to do was highlight for you the things that I'm doing in between my Shadowland run. So week after week, how I'm approaching my next week of Shadowland speedruns, so that if you want to try it out, you can, but also that you can get a bit of understanding for what I'm doing and why I'm doing certain things, and just to discover that there's a lot more tiny ways to micromanage and kind of micro-organize in this game than you might be aware of. So the first thing I've been doing, and it's kind of straightforward, and it's the most easy to understand and identify with and relate to, building characters offensively. There's essentially two ways to build characters in this game. You can build them defensively for Alliance Conquest, timeline battles, shenanigans with invincibility obelisks, lots of max HP, recovery rate, etc. Or you can go the other route and build characters offensively for things like World Boss Clears, World Boss Ultimate, Extreme Alliance Battle, and in my case, Shadowland Speed Clears. So having someone like Black Panther, newly developed and with a crit rate 180 damage proc, I need to prioritize him in Shadowland. I built specifically new characters like Ulysses Claw, who we've already discussed in a review video. He's extremely offensively slotted and statted with his tier 2 passive and his 4-star passive. So I thought I would take advantage of that and make him even more offensive, and I rolled this really nice crit rate 180 damage proc to use him specifically in Shadowland. So he's basically almost maxed out on both crit rate and crit damage. And I'll discuss why characters like Ulysses Claw are actually better overall than other characters. I'm not building all of my characters offensively, but for the majority of the new ones that I'm getting, I am building offensively. So I just tier 2'd Green Goblin recently with my extra Chaos Nornstones. I do need to re-roll his Obelisk, because although poison damage invincibility is nice, I want to give him a damage proc. I want to take advantage of that 45% increased poison damage to see if he can do a Shadowland stage, in 10 seconds and just flat out be of value to me. In addition, I recently tier 2'd Angela. We all know that she's a glass cannon for damage. I rolled this fire damage 100 proc. It's not good enough, but I'll get it there eventually, and hopefully, especially with her uniform close to legendary, I'll be able to use her as kind of a one-shot for a certain stage because of her extreme damage, although she is fragile. So that's kind of the first thing I've been doing. I'm still building Quasar. I'm also still building Killmonger. I plan to add them both to my roster of Shadowland specific characters. And I also, spoiler alert, recently tier 2'd Baron Mordo, and I plan to do the same thing for him. I rerolled his ISO 8 set from Prince of Lie to Overdrive, and I definitely need to give him a better obelisk. But that's the first thing I'm doing. The second thing I'm doing is actually, in terms of the characters that I'm building up and overpowering with offensive obelisks, upgrading their uniforms, etc., is I'm prioritizing 3 types of characters. The first type is universals. So I actually noticed it today, but out of all the universals, I have them all tier 2 except Blue Marvel and Jane Foster. I'm planning to tier 2 Blue Marvel as soon as Netmarble gives me enough biometrics from the lab shop, or they give me another way to get his biometrics in a fair way. And then I don't know when I'm going to tier 2 Jane Foster, but she's basically the only one left. Universals, as you know, or you may not know, are perfect for Shadowland because they can do any stage. They don't have a restriction as the other 3 do. They may do reduced damage on certain stages, and that reduced damage is amplified past stage 25, but before that they're extremely flexible, and you can basically use them on any stage, even if the requirement is blast type, combat type, or universal. In addition, speed. In addition to prioritizing universals, I'm also prioritizing both blast types and villains. So that is why I wanted to give Ulysses Claw an offensive obelisk, and that is why I also tier 2'd Baron Mordo. No, I am not equipping his uniform. If you take a look at all of the different stages for Shadowland, if you go on Reddit or you go through one of my old videos and you look at the spreadsheet that lists out every possible stage option for Shadowland, you will see two patterns arise. You need a lot of villains, and you need a lot of blast types. So it basically goes to bear that if you have a lot of blast types, if you have a lot of villains, and if you have a lot of blast villains, you're going to have a much more flexible roster that can easily adapt on the fly during a speed run to a very fast speed and turnaround time and finish time for the stage if you have a lot of blast villains and universals in general. The third thing I'm doing, and this is where we get into a little bit more of the specific kind of screws of micromanaging, is actually in the character mapping and team mapping. So rather than choosing characters based on just how strong they are and choosing one character, I've decided to go with 3 characters for each stage so I can take advantage of a leadership, so I can take advantage of potentially team bonuses. That does slow me down because I have to press and find 3 characters each time I load up a stage instead of just the one. So for example, instead of just going Nova and hitting start, I have to go Nova, and then I have to find the other 2 characters. Okay, it's America Chavez and Scourge, and then I drag her over. Let's say this was the team, hypothetically. So yes, I've wasted more time, but the upside is I get the Rising Passion leadership. So what I've been trying to do is to actually minimize the amount of time that I spend in this portion of Shadowland in terms of character choosing. So I've minimized the amount of time by doing 2 things. The first thing is that I try to choose and map out teams that are going to be related to each other in terms of how close they are together. And it's not just how close they are together on this page, because I also focus on how I can filter them out in a way that's going to still make it easy for me to find them. So for example, I have a stage 17 team of Ancient One, Storm, and Mantis. Seems like a pretty bizarre team. It might not be the fastest team to clear it. There's definitely faster blast types, but I'm using them on different stages. But if you go here and you filter by blast types, you'll see that I can very quickly go 1, 2, 3 and have them all selected. So they're actually close to each other in terms of their proximity, in terms of the character portraits. So I'm not choosing characters like, for example, if I wanted Iron Man, he's all the way down at the bottom. That would make it very inefficient because I have to pull up, if you're not using a touchscreen with your finger, I have to use my mouse, and so it takes a lot longer. So it's little things like that that I'm doing in addition to mapping out stages based on hero positions. So I go and I look as to where the heroes are. I also have to take into consideration where they're going to be after I've already used other heroes. So it may take a week or 2 of practice by kind of doing a dry run where you do it, you do all the motions of the speed run, but you don't actually go at full speed. So you can see how as your roster dwindles and gets smaller and the available hero pool disappears, where they will be, where characters will be in relation to one another, so you can choose their position. For example, I use Anti-Man on stage either 28 or 29. And I use Anti-Man traditionally with Heimdall and Valkyrie, or I use a couple of other characters. But as you can see, they're almost out of the picture in this image when I have all of my characters selected. However, by the time I get to 29, they're basically lined up next to each other, where Adam Warlock and X-23 would be, because I've used all of the other characters, or most of the other characters, to kind of filter up my remaining heroes and villains. So by mapping these out, I can reduce the amount of time that I'm spending on this screen, and I can therefore cut down on my total Shadowland clear speed time substantially. Because even if you're just saving a few seconds, let's say you save 3 seconds on every stage, that's 90 seconds over the course of 30 stages. That's a minute and a half of saved time. That could more than be the difference, because some weeks I get crushed in Shadowland speedruns. For example, what happened yesterday, I finished in 28 minutes. The guy who won got it in 22 minutes. However, the week before that, the Shadowland King of the Hill, or the Shadowland First Master, was 26 minutes and a half, and I was at 28 minutes and a half. So that's a 2-minute gap. If I wasn't doing this, and I could shave down a minute and a half, you're now looking at a 30-second difference between being number 1 and being number 2. So I don't want to be number 2, I want to be number 1, so you got to do things like this. In addition, I'm also exploring the possibility of the team bonus page. Right now, I've only found one hero to do it with, and that is Black Bolt, because he appears on the top of the page. I do not think it's a good idea under any circumstances to scroll through and try to find other heroes just to do corny team-ups. It takes way too long. But if you can reduce the number of clicks, for example, on an early Shadowland stage, I think it's a Rumble stage 5 or 6, I have Black Bolt, Daisy, and Lincoln. Seems like a pretty bizarre team, and if you try to select it from this main page, it's going to take you forever. But if we do one click, or sorry, well, it'll be over here. So you do 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 clicks, scroll a little bit, and boom, right there in Humans. And if you do that very quickly, what it ends up looking like is something like this, where you can just go in, click, 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 scroll a little bit more, set the team, and go. And it's little moments like that that you can help cut down your time and react to stages faster, and then hopefully clear the Shadowland stage faster if you're trying to do a speed run. And then you can also take into account team bonuses, like when you have specific characters together, like Wolverine and Jean Grey. But I try to stick to those other things first, and I leave team bonuses for the end, because while it may be cute to use team bonuses, most of the time it makes it much harder to actually select the team, and it's much slower, and you lose more time there than you make up by having an extra 5% all attack or extra ignore defense from the team up bonus. Lastly, I wanted to highlight some things that I'm not doing, but I am going to start doing for next week's run. So I have about a week now to prepare, and I have some ideas for myself, having reflected, having listened to my fans on the live stream and their suggestions, how I can improve for next week. And I think the biggest problem that I'm having, or the biggest mistake that I'm making, is that I'm not using enough of my high power characters. For example, I totally missed out this week on using Carnage on any stage. While Carnage has kind of fallen out of use for general gameplay, he's still a very high DPS burst character, and especially with the way I've built him for Extreme Alliance Battle, he's got a 200% crit rate proc. That's even better than Black Panther's proc. In addition, he's got 5-star and 6-star Uru. So putting a character like that out and not using him is a really huge waste of potential. I mean, he's cranking out over 20,000 physical attack, almost maxed stats, and it's just, you know, a shame to not see him do something. And there's other characters that I also just plumb forgot or didn't find a place for, and instead I may have used inferior characters because they had stuck to my original plan where I had mapped out every stage with a viable team. So what I want to do for next week, and I can keep you guys updated on it if you're interested, is I want to make a list from my characters of my top 40 or top 50 highest damage characters. So even though, for example, Thor does more damage with a damage proc than one of these other characters, my Thor in specific has a guard break, lightning damage, invincibility obelisk, so he may not be in my top 50, despite the fact that he may be among the top 30 or 40 highest DPS characters in general. So I have to take a kind of a deeper look and analyze my roster and choose carefully, based on obelisks, based on ISO 8 sets and Uru, which characters I can count on to do the most damage the fastest. You can obviously bet that most of the characters from the top 30 snapshot of the meta will be on my list, but there will be some differences. Like, for example, I think Corvus, despite being on that list or being somewhere near the list, is probably not going to be in my top 40 or top 50 because he's painfully under-geared for Shadowland. He's got defensive obelisk. He does have an offensive ISO 8 set, but then his Uru are just not very good, and he only has one slot filled out for physical attack, so he's really not in my top 40 or top 50. So that would be an example of a character that I need to try to ignore or not prioritize for Shadowland, as opposed to someone like Carnage, who I missed out on and I should have had in there. So let me know what you guys think of the Shadowland speedrun tips and the help, and if you're interested now more than ever of doing your own Shadowland speedrun and seeing if you can beat my time or beat the other masters' times to get the Master of Shadowland, the first one. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.